Hello and thanks for joining me. Today we're looking at a video by some guy who calls himself Atheism versus Logic. The thesis of his channel is exactly what it says on the tin, that logic is opposed to atheism. To give you an idea of what he means by logic, many if not most of his videos concern young earth creationism. I'm not going to address those videos because, as I said in a previous video, I don't have the time of day for creationism at this point in my life. He also has a video called How to End a Debate with Atheists, which, although it's not the video I'm actually looking at today, I'm just going to show a few seconds of because something kind of fascinating happens here.
So this is how I recommend ending a debate with an atheist, with this one sentence. And that one sentence is, if this won't change your mind, then I don't think anything else will. So for an example, if we're talking about just the evidence for a general creator, you could remind them of the video you might have already showed them of biological molecular machines and say, if that doesn't change your mind, then I don't think anything else will.
Now, there's a fallacy called, no kidding, the fallacy fallacy. It's the fallacy of saying that since a given argument contains a fallacy, the conclusion of that argument must therefore be incorrect. I've often seen Christians use the fallacy. I've rarely seen one score an own goal with it.
Down the left side with Sophia Smith, early ball in, that's trouble, goal!
That's the fascinating part. So by your logic, nobody who became a Christian prior to 1953 was rationally justified in doing so, because that was the year DNA was discovered, and so nobody's mind was changed by DNA prior to that year, which means nobody's mind could have been changed by anything else prior to that year. I suppose we could push it back to 1883 when enzymes were discovered, or I suppose you could substitute another argument such as Craig's Kalam argument, which first appeared in 1979, or even Al-Ghazali's original Kalam argument, which gets you as far back as the 11th century. But no matter what argument you think of, we had Christians before we had that argument. The point is, saying to an atheist, if this argument doesn't change your mind then nothing will, doesn't say anything about the atheist, it says something about you. It says, first, that you happen to find this argument really compelling, or at least that you claim to, and second, that you don't want to pursue any sort of discussion with the atheist if you can't immediately compel them to believe as you believe. What you're offering to your viewers here is an ejector seat. A face-saving way of exiting the conversation if you can't defend the argument, which, against even a moderately educated atheist, you can't. But the video we're looking at today is actually called Refuting Atheism is Simple, which is why there are so few atheists in the world, right? And now you're going to tell me that atheists aren't intellectual at all, that we just don't want to surrender our moral autonomy and praise a being who can send us to eternal torture, which, if that was the case, I would cheerfully admit. It takes almost no pride at all to say that I am a better person than the God worshipped by many Christians. But we're talking about refuting atheism intellectually here, or at least that's the idea. So let's take a look.
So refuting atheism is very simple, but many people are dedicated to atheism. We can do it through logical arguments. For instance, one would be, just an example of one that we all agree on, is that
So this whole thing is going to take the form of an argument by analogy, and this is something I've been meaning to talk about for some time. An argument from analogy takes the following form. P and Q have common features A, B, C, etc. P additionally has feature X, therefore, it's likely that Q also has feature X. You're going to draw an analogy between folded laundry and 3D printers on the one hand, and the molecular level processes of life on the other. More accurately, you're going to draw an analogy between the arguments for intelligent agency behind all those things. As we're going to see, it's kind of a meta analogy you've got going on here. As we're also going to see, it's not going to go the way you hope.
Imagine you are on vacation, you come home, and there are stacks of neatly folded laundry in your dryer. A logical person would conclude that somebody folded that laundry and put it in the dryer. You don't turn on a dryer and then when it's done you look in and somehow the spinning randomly folded and stacked the laundry for you, right? We all agree that that's ridiculous to believe that.
So what do we know about folded laundry sitting on a dryer? First, it's a thing. Second, it's a thing which comes about as the result of a process. Third, the process is the result of intelligent agency. Fourth, that agency is human. Never in the history of the cleaning, drying, and folding of laundry has laundry been verifiably folded and stacked on the dryer by a guinea pig or a ghost. I suppose it's possible that a really smart, really agile dog might be trained to fold laundry, And certainly someone somewhere has created a robot that will fold laundry. Granted, that robot would be constructed and programmed by an intelligent agent, but again, that intelligent agent would invariably be human. So just to allow for the dog, let's change it to the agency is material, mortal, finite, and imperfect.
So as a logical argument, you would write it as, premise one, stacks of neatly folded laundry only come from an intelligent being. Premise two, there are stacks of folded laundry in my dryer. Conclusion, an intelligent being folded and stacked the laundry in my dryer, right?
If that argument is valid, then this argument is just as valid. Premise 1, stacks of neatly folded laundry only come from a material, mortal, finite, and imperfect being. Premise 2, there are stacks of folded laundry on my dryer. Conclusion, a material, mortal, finite, and imperfect being stacked the laundry on my dryer.
Same with a 3D printer. You could walk into a room, you could see a 3D printer printing something, and nobody would say, well, since I didn't see somebody set this up, since I didn't see it being manufactured, I didn't see somebody, turn this on and send the code to it to get it going, you wouldn't say, well, since I didn't see all that, then maybe this 3D printer started printing and it came into existence without an intelligent being. That would be crazy.
Premise 1, the operation of a 3D printer only comes from a material, mortal, finite, and imperfect being. Premise 2, there is an operating 3D printer in the room. Conclusion, a material, mortal, finite, and imperfect being operated the 3D printer. So we have 4 valid arguments so far, but not a single mention of God, much less a very simple disproof of atheism. Let's see where this is going.
And so inside every living cell is something called biological translation. There is code inside every living cell known as mRNA.
There are 2 meanings of the word code. One is a system of symbols which are to be substituted for other symbols, usually for the purpose of ensuring secrecy. mRNA is not a code in this sense. There is no combination of adenine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil, which translates into the enemy forces will attack Fresno at 1800 hours after the softball game. The other meaning of code is programming instructions. Computer programming is a human activity, an activity directed by intelligent, material, mortal, finite, and imperfect beings. So, to say that mRNA is a code at this stage of the argument is to beg the question. If the process you're about to describe,
and it's translated into a polypeptide chain, which becomes a protein, and many of the molecular machines and enzymes inside living cells are proteins,
is in fact programming with mRNA as the code, then this is something that has to be established. That needs an argument. Similarly, you refer to enzymes as machines. Machines, like programming code, are things that we know are created by intelligent, material, mortal, finite, and imperfect beings. Sometimes various processes in nature are called machines in a metaphorical sense, but you're not being metaphorical. You're claiming that enzymes are actually, literally, machines. So if you proceed to give an argument to that effect, we'll know to take you seriously. If you're just going to say code in the machinery to turn that code into more machine parts only comes from intelligence, and every living cell has code in the machinery to turn that code into more machine parts, then we'll know you're full of crap.
So here's the logical argument for that. Code and the machinery to turn that code into more machine parts only comes from intelligence. Every living cell has code and the machinery to turn that code into more machine parts.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, no, hold on. Maybe I'm being premature here. Maybe you'll give some supplemental argumentation, rather than just go to the conclusion that an intelligent being started the process of code and machinery to turn that code into more machine parts.
So what's our conclusion? An intelligent being started the process of code and machinery to turn that code into more machine parts.
Dude, I'm trying to help you here. Come on, elaborate on why these premises are true. Don't just say like your daughter's calling you and launch into a pre-recorded commercial.
My daughter's calling me. This book is great for new believers, and if I were a youth pastor again, then I would just go through these 100 questions.
Well, I tried. By the way, if you were a youth pastor again, I know youth pastors themselves have to be pretty young, but you're a pretty young guy with what sounds like a pretty young daughter. You don't strike me as someone who would have retired from being a youth pastor because of age. Sounds like there's a story there. Anyway, you're obviously relying on the power of analogy to make your audience think that, just as the folded laundry and 3D printer arguments are valid, so too is the molecular machine argument valid. But if we are to accept that the situations are analogous, then we are left with the following. 1. Code and machinery only comes from material, mortal, finite, and imperfect agents. If you take issue with this premise, then give me a single counterexample that doesn't beg the question for the existence of God. 2. Every living cell has code and machinery. 3. Therefore, living cells are created by material, mortal, finite, and imperfect agents. 4. If God exists, then living cells are not created by material, mortal, finite, and imperfect agents. They were created by an agent who is precisely not these things. Therefore, by applying modus tollens to 3 and 4, God does not exist. The YouTuber who calls himself Atheism versus Logic seems to have a knack for scoring own goals.
And when it rains, it pours. It is pouring right now.
If you enjoyed this video and want to help my channel grow, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Be sure to hit the bell to be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to share your thoughts on arguments from analogy, DNA, RNA, or your favorite programming language, leave a comment below. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm David John Wellman, and the rest is up to you.